is Rosendo Iniguez. I serve as the program manager for the Latino Coordinating Center for Tobacco-Free California. We'll have an opportunity to share more about the program and, of course, introduce the policy platform this morning. Before we go ahead and begin, I want to provide an overview of the objectives of today's webinar. Number one, we want to introduce or reintroduce the Latino Coordinating Center, especially for those that perhaps are new to tobacco or perhaps aren't necessarily aware of the work that we do. We'll also want to provide an overview of the tobacco-related disparities that impact the Latino community and from their transition to introducing the policy platform, which helps to identify specific recommendations that we can utilize to reduce these tobacco-related disparities that impact the Latino community all throughout the state of California. And more specifically, how that ties into the end game goal that we've identified and established here in the state of California. We also want to recognize that one of the conversations that we've had for several years now is what term is more appropriate when we're talking about the Latino community. We, as a Latino coordinator, understand that we're a very diverse group, and there's different names. We identify in different names, whether we identify as Latino, Latinx, Latinen, Hispanic. Others might identify differently. For example, myself, I identify as Mexican American, while others perhaps might identify as Chicano or Latino or Latinx. What we really want to emphasize is that there's no one term that applies to the whole public. When we understand that, we recognize that. We will, in this webinar, utilize the term Latino for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a term that's still more popularly utilized and more commonly known among the general Latino community, specifically our Latin or Spanish-speaking folks. It is also the term that we utilize primarily in our policy platform. Part of that is also because a lot of the secondary data that we referenced in our policy platform utilize the term Latino. But we want to emphasize the term that is most appropriate depends on the population and the community that you're serving. So in some communities, Latinx might be the most appropriate term. In others, it might be Latino or it might be something totally different. So by no means is there a one-size-fits-all. And we encourage all of you to learn more about the community that you serve to identify which term is more appropriate as you serve the population. With that being said, I'll pass it on to Evie, who will introduce more about the Latino Coordinating Center and services that we provide.
Can you advance the slides, Rosendo? I don't have access yet.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here this morning and to have all of you join us for the webinar. I hope that wherever it is that you are today, that your day is as beautiful as we're having here in Central California. I have to admit, the only place I'd rather be right now would be outside enjoying this beautiful weather that we're having. So I hope you're having it just as nice as we are. My name is Evie Hernandez. I'm Senior Director of Programs with the California Health Collaborative and the Project Director for the Latino Coordinating Center for a Tobacco-Free California, which, in keeping with CTCP tradition of using acronyms for everything, and to make it more affectionate, we refer to our program as the LCC. We are excited this morning again for the opportunity to share the LCC's policy platform, which is a result of over 2 years of work by our team, and also in consultation with our advisory committee, the regional Hispanic Latino projects, and various tobacco control stakeholders throughout the state, which includes many of you in the webinar today. The Latino Coordinating Center, or LCC, is a program of the California Health Collaborative, and it is in partnership with the University of Southern California, or USC. The mission of the program is to improve the overall health of Latinos in California by reducing tobacco-related disparities through the adoption and implementation of policy and systems changes via statewide collaboration and community empowerment. All right. So just a quick look at who we are as a program, as a team. My name again is Evie, and I'm the project director. I'm located in Central Valley out of the Fresno office. On the USC side, Dr. Lourdes Baescone Garbanati is a principal investigator. She is someone that's been doing tobacco control for a long time, and you will see, if you haven't yet, that in the policy platform, a lot of her work is referenced. So just to give you a bit of a heads up. On the California Health Collaborative side, the program manager is Rosendo Iñiguez, whom you have met. He's located out of our Fresno office and works with the Central Valley and Bay Area regional projects. In Northern California, we have Luz Garcia. She's located out of the Sacramento office and works with the Northern California programs. Then in San Bernardino, we have Josh Ramirez, and he is the person responsible for working with the Tri-County South areas in Southern California, and he's based out of the San Bernardino office. On the USC side, our colleagues, Yanet Rodriguez, she works with the LA region and Southern California regions, and also serves in the capacity of program evaluator for our program. So she has a couple different roles within the program. And then we also have Rosa Barahona as a program specialist, also located in the LA area. And she is the budget person that we work with in our partnership with USC. Just to give you a brief glance at what our program service area looks like, the colored regions of the state, various colors there, represent each of the 8 regional projects that we work with. And for each of those regions, you can see here in this slide, we have the region that they serve, as well as the project and the organization that is funded to do the work. You also see contact information for each of the programs. So if at any time you would want to collaborate, network with these programs, this is the contact information. And as you have seen, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll have access to this information after today. The LCC provides tailored assistance, again, to those 8 regional projects in California. And as a matter of fact, it really has gone beyond the 8 regional projects because we are working collaboratively with a lot of other CTCP funded programs. In our work, we are working to foster that collaboration and making sure that there's effective communication between the programs because we know that the resources and the information that they each have could be helpful to all of them in their work. One of the things that we knew coming into this program back in 2017 was that there was a lack of tobacco control advocates in California representing the Latino community. So that is a big goal of the program and something that I believe we're making big headways in. We're also working with elected officials through our local district days events and our information and education meeting participation. And setting up meetings and getting representation and the voice of Latinos before the elected officials, both at the local, county, and state levels. We're developing educational materials and resources, which we knew were lacking and that our programs were in big need of. So hope that all of you have access to this information. And if not, please let us know. We'd be happy to share. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we are very excited to share this policy platform and excited to be able to put it on your hands and let you make good with the work that I believe will be helpful in your policy campaigns. So I will pass it back to Rosendo, who's going to lead us in the next section of the webinar.
Evan, I want to take a few minutes to discuss how exactly tobacco has impacted the Latino community, to make the argument again as to why this policy platform is important, why we need to consider the Latino community in the tobacco-related efforts that we utilize, and as well as when we think about the end game. I think the first thing that I want to share is the fact that the Latino community makes up the largest ethnic group in the state of California, accounting for nearly 40% of the state's total population, and that's only projected to grow as the years pass by. With that being said, when we look at the Latino community, compared to other racial and ethnic groups, the smoking rate is not necessarily as high. But because of the large Latino community that we have, this equates to about 1.1 million Latino adults who smoke or utilize tobacco, which is about the second largest group of adult smokers in the state of California after non-Hispanic whites. So of course, this is a major concern. So looking at percentage-wise, it is not as high, but considering the large population we have, we make up one of the largest groups of people who smoke in the state of California. With that brings a lot of issues. And of course, that is not necessarily by accident that we have such a large group of people who utilize tobacco. One of the things that we want to highlight, one of the things that we've seen is the tobacco industry intentionally targeting Latino population, Latino communities. One of the examples we like to share is the fact that in most recent years, the tobacco industry, specifically the vaping industry, has developed flavored or e-liquid products that appeal to Latino youth, as you see on your screen, and flavors such as churros, tres leches, flan, and other flavors that are very appealing to the Latino community. And of course, with these products come high levels of nicotine and of course other concerns with the carcinogens and other chemicals that are found in these products. We've also seen that the tobacco industry tries to buy the community support. And quite frankly, I would probably say that they've been successful in trying to create this positive impression of the Latino community. But in fact, that really poses huge harm and a threat to the public health of all Latinos in the state of California. In fact, we've seen that the tobacco industry in previous years have funded universities, have also provided large donations to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And one thing recently that came up that I wanted to share is that the Latino Caucus of California Counties, which is a group composed of supervisors and elected officials throughout the state of California, have recently accepted sponsorship from Altria, one of the largest tobacco companies in the world. And so the fact that the Latino Caucus of California Counties are sponsored by Altria really poses a lot of concern. And we're having internal and external conversations on how we can approach this to ensure that this doesn't create this notion that the tobacco industry supports the Latino community, when in fact we know it's harming the population. We also noticed that the Latino community are less protected by smoke-free workplace laws. And part of that is that many of the occupations that Latinos hold are considered outdoor work areas. And many of those occupations are not eligible or don't fall under California's smoke-free workplace law. These include occupations in the painting and construction and the maintenance and agriculture, many of which are occupations and jobs where Latinos are overrepresented. These are occupations that many Latinos work in. And so with that being said, day in and day out, they're then exposed to secondhand and third-hand smoking because of the lack of smoke-free workplace laws or the fact that it doesn't necessarily apply to those occupations. We also see that Latinos are less protected in multi-unit housing. And when we talk about multi-unit housing, we're talking about locations such as apartments, condominiums, buildings that have shared walls. What we see is that Latinos are more susceptible to being exposed to secondhand and third-hand smoke, both of which are extremely detrimental to health and health outcomes. And that's partly because they're more likely to live in multi-unit housing. In fact, when we look at renters in the state of California, nearly about 40% of them are Latino. Also considering the fact that Latinos tend to have a larger household size compared to non-Latino families, that also puts Latino much more greater risk because you have more people living in the home and more Latinos more likely to be renters. We have made huge strides in the state of California in different communities to implement smoke-free multi-unit housing policies, but there's still a lot of communities, many of which have a large Latino population, that are yet to protect their tenants from secondhand and third-hand smoke. And just to emphasize, and perhaps I recognize that I might be preaching to the choir here, but secondhand, third-hand smoke are significant threats to public health. Not only the health of the individuals, but also thinking about the children who are constantly exposed to secondhand, third-hand smoke, the impact that it might have on on increasing the risk of certain health issues, such as asthma and certain types of cancer, but also be considering the fact that those that are exposed to secondhand smoke or might also are more likely to experience more challenges performing academically. So you can also kind of think of the different social justice aspect that can impact the Latino community. We also see that Latino neighborhoods have more tobacco retailers compared to the general public. When we look at the data, Latino communities are burdened with higher density tobacco retailers with about 103.3 per 100,000 residents, compared to 78 for the general population. Now, research has indicated, and we'll elaborate much more on these in some of the future webinars that we'll hold, but studies have indicated that the closer an individual is to a tobacco retailer, or the more availability that exists, the more likely that individual is to either initiate tobacco use or continue tobacco use, compared to somebody who perhaps lives much farther from tobacco. So we understand that the availability is a huge determinant as to whether youth and young adults initiate tobacco use. And we've also seen that in some of those tobacco stores, there are certain tobacco products that are more marketed to the Latino community, and as well as the Black community, quite frankly. One of these being little cigars or cigarillos, as you see on your screen, with some of these common examples. We see that these products are much more prominent, much more prevalent in stores that are in Black and Latino neighborhoods compared to other communities. And last but not least, tobacco is associated with several health issues, many of which are the leading causes of death among the Latino community. For example, we see that cancer, heart disease, and stroke, which of course are linked to tobacco use, are the leading causes of death. And quite frankly, this is something that we need to ensure that is very, very clear, is that there's also a direct link between tobacco use and diabetes, which is the fourth major cause of death among Latinos. Not only does smoking increase the risk of diabetes, but for those who already have diabetes and smoke or are exposed to secondhand or third-hand smoke, the likelihood of complications due to their diabetes is much greater. So it is important that we recognize that tobacco is still a huge issue in the Latino community. And we understand that there's also other existing issues in the Latino community, but by addressing tobacco, we can make significant strides in improving the health of the Latino population and Latino community. So with that being said, I want to pass it on to Jeanette to talk more about the end game and how this relates to the Latino community.
Thank you, Rosendo. I will be briefly discussing the endgame and the Latino community. So many of you on this webinar are probably familiar with the endgame, but we're aware that our invitation extended beyond CTCP funded projects. So we thought it would be important to define what the endgame is. The California Tobacco Control Program has a goal to end the sale of tobacco by 2035. And the commercial tobacco campaign seeks to eradicate the tobacco industry's influence in California and reduce the harm caused by tobacco products to the health, environment, and economic well-being of Californians. This is an important goal for California, and to reach it, we need to understand how to apply this campaign to many of the priority populations of California, which includes the Latino population. Rosendo just discussed the tobacco disparities that the Latino population experience, which is what we are trying to eliminate with the endgame. Oops. Before I go any further, I did want to make a very important distinction. When we're talking about the tobacco endgame, we're talking about commercial tobacco. The LCC recognizes that traditional tobacco has been used for many centuries by many American Indian and Alaskan Native communities for ceremonial, religious, or medicinal purposes. Commercial tobacco, on the other hand, includes any form of tobacco that is intended for sale, which includes products like cigarettes, e-cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, pipe tobacco, cigars, and hookah. So we want to make it clear that the strategies we describe in our policy platform are intended to reduce commercial tobacco, intended to be sold for recreational and habitual use. So this campaign recognizes that ending the influence of the tobacco industry and stopping the continued harm caused by tobacco products will not happen overnight, or by a single champion, or the adoption of a single law. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us coming together to work towards this common purpose. We need to build a movement And we need to help our communities transition away from this notion that commercial tobacco is normal and acceptable for this addictive, lethal product to be available for sale. I have been fortunate to sit on the Endgame Advisory Council for the California Tobacco Control Program. And one of the things that we constantly discuss is that we cannot leave any communities behind. And in order to do that, we need to work with our communities to engage them in this process in reaching the end game. And this is particularly important for the Latino community. So we want to emphasize the importance of incorporating the Latino community in this work. However, when working with the Latino community, we need to understand that Latinos are not a monolith. We are not all the same people. We are a very diverse population. For example, we are linguistically diverse. Not all of us speak Spanish. Some of us don't even speak Spanish. Or we may use a different dialect of Spanish, and some Latinos may even speak an indigenous language. So it's important that when we outreach to the Latino community, that we understand these differences by providing messaging in different languages and modalities. The key is to understand your local Latino community. We are also racially and ethnically diverse. Latinos may be white, Black, Asian, indigenous, or of mixed race. So it's important that program materials and information be culturally adapted and reflect the racial and ethnic diversity that exists within the Latino community. We are also diverse in terms of immigration status. The Latino community includes many whose families have lived in the US for generations, as well as recent immigrants and everyone in between. Members range from fully acculturated to not at all acculturated. And most are US citizens or permanent residents, but many are undocumented. And it's not uncommon for members of the same household to have different immigration statuses. So it's important to be attentive to these sensitivities around this issue and to create a safe environment that promotes trust and engagement. We are also diverse in terms of socioeconomic status. In California, Latinos tend to earn less than non-Latinos and are underrepresented among higher income brackets, overrepresented among lower income brackets, and more likely to live in poverty. Undocumented Latino immigrants may face additional challenges, such as limited work opportunities, creating economic hardships and uncertainty for them and their families. So it's important that we be sensitive to the wide range of socioeconomic circumstances and stressors that the Latino community members experience. And many Latinos have intersecting identities. Latinos have additional ways of describing themselves with respect to their race or other aspects that are important to them, such as sexual orientation and gender identity. In some cases, these intersecting identities are associated with additional tobacco-related disparities. For example, those who are indigenous, Afro-Latino, multiracial, or LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, may experience greater exposure to tobacco use in their environment and reduced exposure to anti-tobacco messaging and greater barriers to cessation assistance. So it's important to account for these additional disparities in policy and our program work. So it's important for us to work with communities because when we are thinking of these strategies, we want to use equitable approaches from a health equity framework, from the beginning to end. And it's important that we do not exacerbate the existing disparities in the Latino community. Many of the points in our policy platform will remind you of this aspect, and this is an important aspect of our policy platform, that we should always be thinking in a health equity framework and that we focus on engaging with the community and in particular with your local community, because the community is going to know what's best for the community. So now I would like to pass it on to Rosendo, who will be going over the priorities of the policy platform.
Hey, Janet. So we've been working on the policy platform for about a couple of years now. And again, we're glad to have this ready and available for you all to access and utilize. As we've mentioned, and the way to envision this, for those that maybe it's the first time hearing about a policy platform, we're not really quite familiar with what exactly this is. One way to see it is a roadmap or a guide that guides you through different policy system and environmental changes that we feel are most conducive to reducing these tobacco-related disparities that we discussed during this webinar, as well as those disparities that we see in our community. This platform is intended to help advocates such as you all here joining us in this webinar, policymakers, and other stakeholders advance these tobacco control priorities. We understand, and one thing that I want to emphasize is that this is a live document. This is a document that will continue to evolve because we know that the tobacco industry continues to find new ways to target the Latino community. So as they progress and evolve, so will this policy platform. And we will be providing new and additional recommendations as they come along. I will also emphasize that this policy platform, the policy priorities that we've identified, were identified as a result of multiple conversations, assessments, evaluations with the 8 regional projects, as well as other tobacco control partners and our advisory committee, which we want to recognize. Also, the priorities identified are also supported by numerous secondary data, and specifically research articles that help to confirm and provide evidence as to why these priorities will have an impact in the Latino population if they are implemented. We also understand that some of these policies priorities have already been implemented by some of our partners, including our regional projects, and is leading to great benefit in the community. So we want to recognize that many have already utilized and are working on some of these priorities. And if that's not the case, we encourage everybody to utilize the policy platform as a guide to address these tobacco-related disparities. I also want to emphasize before we dive into the priorities that if you are an organization that doesn't necessarily work in tobacco control, but you work in other realms that focus on Latino health, this can still be incorporated. You can still utilize this information in the work that you do, because as we mentioned previously, there's a direct correlation between tobacco use and other issues that impact the Latino community, such as diabetes and certain types of cancer, asthma, academic performance among youth and young adults, etc. So we have identified 4 priorities, and as I list them, please keep in mind that these are not listed in order of priority. All 4 of these priorities we have identified as important, and not one is more important than the other. It's just simply the way that we laid them out. The first priority is to prevent youth initiation of tobacco use. So within this priority in our policy platform, we've identified specific policies and environmental changes that will facilitate this. This is a major concern because of the previously mentioned information of the intentional marketing and targeting of the tobacco industry among Latino youth. In fact, we see that in some communities, Latino youth report higher prevalence of vaping and tobacco use compared to other racial and ethnic groups. We also have seen that there is much more availability and marketing to Latino youth. So within this policy, and I don't want to dive too much into it, but I'll just provide a brief overview. We include policies such as TRL, such as restricting the sale of flavored tobacco, as well as regulating the price and advertising of tobacco products in these communities. I will say, and I'll provide more information in a few minutes, that we plan to have multiple webinars in which we're going to dive more specifically into each one of these priorities. So this is not the first nor the last time that we're going to talk about these policy priorities. We simply want to introduce it, and we'll follow up with upcoming webinars. The second priority is to prevent the exposure to secondhand smoke and aerosols. This applies to implementing policies such as smoke-free ordinances, smoke-free outdoor venues, specifically as we talk about parks and outdoor venues such as swap meets and farmers markets, many of which are locations in which there's a large density of Latino folks, as well as smoke-free college campuses. We understand that many campuses across the state of California, specifically those in the UC system and the CSU system, and most recently the community college system, have adopted a smoke-free policy. But one of these we also want to emphasize is the need to pass similar policies in smaller trade and vocational schools, which many of which are also Hispanic serving institutions. So we encourage the implementation of these smoke-free policies across the board on all educational systems and universities. Our third priority is to promote tobacco cessation. And this is very, very important. Number one, we need to ensure that we increase screening and treatment for our Latino folks. One of the things that we've seen is that there is a lack of screening and education specifically for our Latino community members who perhaps maybe speak Spanish or speak in indigenous languages. We also see that research shows that Latinos are less likely to be screened and referred to tobacco cessation services compared to other groups. So we need to ensure that we increase screening and treatment among the Latino community. It is also important for us to increase referrals to services, cessation services, including KICA California, as well as other services provided at the local level. We understand that KICA California is a great resource that provides information in Spanish and in other languages. So we need to ensure that we are able to then refer individuals to those services. We also encourage, and we'll talk more about this as well during that webinar, utilizing the Ask and Advise referral protocol, as we have found them very effective and will provide much more information in webinars to come. And last but not least, we also want to ensure that we build community capacity in leadership. The term, or what we hear a lot about in tobacco control, is that we want to work ourselves out of a job. So imagine if all our programs, if we no longer were here, will the community still have the capacity, the ability to lead? Will it still have the ability to address disparities that exist in the population? And that is what we need to ensure, that in the time that we're funded, in the time that we're here, that we build that community capacity, we build leaders in the community, so that way they have the skills, the knowledge, the information necessary to speak to city council, to write a letter to the board of supervisor, to speak out, to advocate and mobilize the community for change that promote public health. Part of this is the inclusion of promotoras, or community health workers, which we have found very effective in not only in tobacco control, but in other health topics and other health areas. In fact, many of our regional projects work with promotoras and have had a lot of success in doing so. Also within this is the need to build diverse coalitions. Many coalitions oftentimes might perhaps lack some type of diversity, specifically in regards to the Latino community. So we want to make sure that we have diverse coalitions, so the voice of the Latino population is heard. With that being said, one example that I want to briefly mention is the Alameda County Tobacco Control Program has the agenda and materials in both English and Spanish, and even has translation available for the Spanish-speaking folks that participate in the meeting. So just one example of a great way to incorporate the Spanish-speaking and the Latino community into the work that we do. And last but not least, we want to ensure that we also empower the youth and engage the youth in the work that we do, as they're very impactful. Multiple policies have been passed after youth have mobilized and spoken to city council, spoken to elected officials, collected data, and been involved with the work that they do, because ultimately we want to create future leaders and a generation of individuals who will then who will have a lower likelihood of living a lifetime of addiction due to the tobacco industry. So these are our 4 priorities that we've identified. And as I mentioned, we're going to dive much more deeper into these policy priorities. And you're more welcome to explore the content behind these priorities in our policy platform. The second webinar, in which we're going to discuss much more about this, it will be held on Thursday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, in which we're going to talk about how to prevent youth initiation of tobacco use. We'll have a much more elaborate conversation on policies such as TRL, flavor restriction, as well as restriction of pricing, or regulation, I should say, of tobacco price and advertising. And we'll also have some guest speakers who will share their personal experience and success stories to really show and paint the picture that this can be done. As we say in Spanish, sí se puede, and in many communities, it has been done. So we invite you to save the date. We'll provide much more information on this webinar as the registration link is available. But we encourage everybody to save the date for May 5th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. in which we're going to discuss this webinar. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Jose Montoya, who serves as one of our advisory committee members. We'll share a few more words about the policy platform and the need to incorporate this in the work that we do.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is exciting news that the Latino Coordinating Center has created this policy platform. and it's been a doing in the making for a couple years. So I want to talk about a call to action. We know from existing tobacco documents housed at UCSF that the Latino community has been directly targeted with business plans and marketing plans. Here's the quote that I found, and to me, it kind of triggered me when I started reading these documents. But I want to read it to you. It says, "The migrant farm worker community needs specific program attention." And when I read that, I thought, wow, they really want to, this Big Tobacco really wants to focus on our community and especially the farm worker community. So one of the things I wanted to do is share just a couple of things that I found in the tobacco documents that puts it into perspective of what's going on in our communities and the targeting of the Latino community. So this is that document that I'm talking about that I found. It's the lower part here where it says the migrant farmer population needs specific program attention. But there is also, I mean, this was pretty much a document that describes a business plan and how Camel and Marlboro, when they compete, they go, they make even more money. So I thought this was interesting, and RJ Reynolds and many of the organizations and corporations that were being irresponsible here are focused on this. We know Big Tobacco is running new PR campaigns. They say they're reformed. They say they're beyond smoking. They even talk about a smoke-free world, but at the same time, they lie, and they've been doing it for decades. And these documents share that. So I want to share another one. Here's a 1992 regional initiative business plan, and they discuss the topic of the Hispanic state and the marketing of the Hispanic community in California. But I wanted to share this real quick. And then here's another one by Marlboro, 1993 Hispanic Media Plan Review. And by the way, you could always look at these documents. They're at UCSF. You just look up tobacco documents, UCSF, and right away you can start looking at and looking up issues on and what you're looking for. You can look up anybody else as well. But I want to show this one because this is important. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and some people even chatted it up. But I want to read this to you. It's a document by a PR firm talking to their client, and it talks about Altria in California and their plan in 2002. As Philip Morris Corporation readies its metamorphosis into Altria Group, this is a critical time to begin building a groundswell of support in the battleground state of California. This plan sets out to define how Altria is for the California audience on the company's terms. Rather than outline strategies to respond to critics, this plan is designed to portray Altria in a positive, non-controversial way. And their objectives are pretty interesting. I'll just skim through them. They talk about educate media targets in California in 10 designated market areas about the wide range of business that comprise of Altria, develop personal relationships with reporters and editorial boards so they have someone to call when working on stories, opinion pieces related to Altria, establish relationships with talk radio and public affairs shows, place an op-ed on business issues in each of the 10 California DMAs. So this is a document that pretty much they share their business plan as far as Altria. So to me, when I read this, I think of, wow, Big Tobacco has done this quite a bit, where they change their name and they try to hide under new names to promote their new strategies and market ploys. And Big Tobacco markets deadly cigarettes while raking in billions of dollars in profits. They fight policies that would actually reduce tobacco use. They continuously develop new products to hook kids. We've seen this in the presentation earlier, and they continue to lie, cheat, and trick people into a lifetime of addiction, disease, and death. And we see it in our communities. So I wanted to share another part here. Okay. So our call to action is this: for non-traditional organizations with organic roots, local lead agencies, regional projects, programs, local leaders, state leaders, stakeholders, we encourage you all to utilize this policy platform in creating talking points, creating presentations, building narratives. This is, again, a live document, an ever-evolving document. This is a movement to confront health inequities in California, created by Big Tobacco. Together, we can collectively in our collective effort, in the spirit of unity, confront Big Tobacco. This is our call to action now. Our movement starts now. We want to thank everybody, and we hope to see you in upcoming events. But I want to share, hand it over to Rosendo.
Thank you, Jose. So just to ditto Jose's comment, we encourage all you all to utilize the policy platform. We also want to take this time because we did not do this alone. The policy platform is a result of collaboration and work with many individuals here listed, including all 8 regional projects. So we want to make sure we acknowledge and recognize all the work that you all put into and your input into the policy platform. So again, we thank each and every one of you who contributed to this document. For those also who have not downloaded the policy platform, you can scan the QR code on your screen, or you can also find it at our website, which we can also post a link momentarily in the chat box. But again, we encourage you to download the policy platform and utilize it in a manner that's most appropriate to your community. And as we emphasize, this is a live document. So as we revise and understand new strategies and also understand new methods that the tobacco industry has incorporated, so will we to evolve the policy platform to ensure that we increase the shelf life of the document, but most importantly, that this is an effective tool in the work that we all do in tobacco control. So at that point, we'll open up to any questions or comments that anybody would like to share. And in the meantime, as perhaps some questions come through, I did notice in the chat box some of the comments that were provided. And also, I believe, Amaya, thank you for mentioning the taquito flavored e-liquid. That's something that we have not heard about, so we appreciate you sharing that. And of course, we'll also have more conversations about Altria's efforts, and we do know that they have been fairly active in Butte County, as well as Monterey County and other parts of the state. So we are looking to be a part of that conversation, and we encourage anybody who's also interested to join us and provide us more, to be a part of the conversation, because what we want to do is we want to ensure that we prepare the counter arguments and are able to counteract these talking points that are provided by the tobacco industry, specifically by those sponsored by Altria. So there's much more conversation to have behind that. So, and then I do see there's a question. Can you please share the download link in the chat? Absolutely. So in fact, what we're going to do is once the webinar is over, the download link would be, I believe there's a download link for the Plus platform. Yes, we'll go ahead and post that momentarily. But we'll also we'll also share the link to the recording after the end of the webinar. There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Luz.
And I believe Lisa has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Ned. Yeah, this is wonderful. I remember at my first LLC meeting in Sacramento, when we were allowed to be in person, I asked, using a platform. So I'm so happy that you have it. It's going to be a great resource for us as we go out and educate the community. I'm wondering if there's going to be more collateral material developed from this, maybe like some template PowerPoint slides that we could start incorporating into our presentations, or anything for social media. I can see nice little posts you can pull out from all the different pages of this, so we can start laying the groundwork in English and in Spanish.
Absolutely. So I will say that this policy platform is not intended to be the last form of TA that we're going to provide, saying, here's the platform, take care of it, and do the work. This is only the first step. So absolutely what we plan to do, and also the way that we formatted the platform is that if, for example, if you really want to emphasize on how to prevent youth initiation, you can simply download and print that section. So it's accessible for that. But we would be glad to assist on a one-on-one basis, also based on the need to perhaps create a PowerPoint presentation. I know one of the questions that might have also come up is, will this policy platform be available in Spanish? And due to the nature of our target audience, we're not necessarily going to translate the platform in Spanish, but we will also, or what we do plan to do based on the need is, if let's say there is a need for a presentation or outreach to Spanish-speaking folks on one of these specific policy priorities, then we'll be glad to create a Spanish presentation to accommodate. So the platform itself will not be translated, but we can, of course, provide more smaller or supplemental materials for the platform. And we are also working on social media content as well. So that is one thing that we are it's in the works. And great suggestions. And also, just as a reminder before I forget, there will also be a survey provided at the end or later on today. So be on the lookout for that survey. Any additional questions?
Rosendo, there was a question that had come in our registration form. And I think it's an important question because I think it has to do with the Altria issue that we're talking about. And the question was, are there alternative smoking products that don't contain any carcinogens or harmful products adults can use to wean off tobacco? That's a very good question. And I think this question is important because currently the FDA, which has authority to regulate tobacco products at the federal level, they have actually developed a system or a process for tobacco companies to submit their products to be labeled as modified risk tobacco products. Now, they definitely have to prove that somehow they are less harmful. However, I want to point out that that does not mean that they are not harmful at all. These products still contain nicotine, they still contain flavored products, they still contain other chemicals to make these products. So, and also, although the FDA has established or deemed these products modified risk, we still don't have long-term research on these products. And so we don't know what the long-term effects of these products are. So unfortunately, I would say that no, there are no alternative products that don't contain carcinogens or harmful products. So just wanted to mention that because I think with the Altria conversation, they are trying to push for harm reduction policies, and unfortunately, that doesn't work. And we really want to eliminate all of these products because we know nicotine is a very addictive substance. So we want to just eliminate all of these products. And I see another question or a hand raised, Marielle.
Good morning. Thank you, LCC team. This was amazing. I'm really looking forward to really reading the platform. I had a quick question, not sure if you all can answer it. So here in the Central Valley, I'm located in Tulare County, but my mom works in Fresno County, and she works at a packing house, which is big here in the Central Valley, a fruit packing house. So it's like a warehouse kind of garage looking. And she has complained to me that there is a lot of smoking going on, but I'm looking at the tobacco-free workplaces page here on the platform. And I'm not sure if the packing house that she's at, is this considered like indoor or outdoor? Because technically it is like garage and it's like half open, half enclosed, but she's still like, they're all very bothered by the tobacco smoke. And a lot of the hesitation to speak up is because a lot of the people working here are undocumented. So they don't want to speak up, but they are still very bothered by it. So I wasn't sure like what resources to give her as far as this is considered indoor smoking or not.
That's a very good question, Moody, and thank you for sharing. You know, there's some gray area in regards to, again, as you mentioned, is it indoor, is it outdoor? The California smoke-free workplace law doesn't necessarily apply to outdoor, but it sounds like there's certain aspects of the packing house that sounds like it's also considered indoor. And I think there's also a certain, based on the amount of employees, that might also play a factor. So I wish we can provide you with a better response or an answer as to what can be done. But what I will say, and one of the concerns you brought up is the fact that many of the workers perhaps are undocumented. And I think that's something that there's a lot of workplaces throughout the state of California that have the same situation when many of them are undocumented. And perhaps because of that, people don't say anything because of fear of losing their job or of other legal consequences. So what we can do, Moody, is for sure look into this a little more further, also consult with the advisory committee. And I see there's also some comments being provided. I also want to open up to our guests from the Public Health Law Center, and also even perhaps our advisory committee members or our staff, to see if there's any additional comments on the question provided here.
I'll just add a statement or two on this. Just based on the type of employment or employer that your mom works for and the structure that she works in, it seems like they would be out of compliance. Definitely something for us to talk about and look into. I would recommend that we can connect offline and maybe with the Fresno County Tobacco Control Program and set up a plan for reaching out to this employer and seeing what we can do. But yeah, if we have anyone else with additional feedback, that would be great.
And I do see another question by Mariela in the chat, and it says, what do you think about taxing tobacco products, specifically regressive tobacco taxes, and how this tax specifically targets lower income individuals? Can we reduce smoking with this tax if individuals can also purchase tobacco products on the black market and avoid the tax? I think this is a really great question. And one of the reasons why taxes or increasing the prices of tobacco products is pushed is because it actually has been shown as a very effective strategy. It's one of the most effective strategies to push people or motivate them to quit. Many people are price sensitive, as you mentioned in your chat and your comment, Latinos in particular. And but research has shown that this is an effective strategy. Now, in terms of the black market and avoiding the tax, I think this is a discussion that we've been having a lot with the Endgame Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, we don't, from the research that many people have been doing, this black market issue is used, or argument is used by the tobacco company to steer us away from this. And so I don't think that we should worry too much about the black market in regards to this. I know that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but I think that there's more positive things that come out of increasing the prices than negative consequences that may occur down the line. So it has been shown as a very effective strategy for price sensitive communities.
Okay, I believe there was one hand up. I think Marta, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to share. I know in the past we have worked with packing houses on voluntary policies. So maybe that would be a good, something to just talk to the packing house manager, and then because we do provide presentations to the workers during their lunchtime. But yeah, we work with the packing houses. Just approaching them and asking them, it's like maybe they can adopt a policy to prohibit smoking because of their health and more information on the health effects of smoking, even though they're outdoors, they're being exposed and things like that. That's it. Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Marta. And that's a really great idea with voluntary policies, and I see Moody will connect with you. So thank you for sharing that. We are approaching 10, or sorry, 11. And so we want to make sure that we're mindful of everybody's time. So we just want to wrap up by just thanking everybody for participating, for the questions, for all the conversation that we've seen in the chat box. We encourage you to reach out to any one of us from the Latino Coordinating Center to elaborate more on the policy platform. Again, we encourage you all to join us for our next webinar on May 5th at the same time, 10 to 11 a.m. And we'll provide much more resources in the time being. So again, thank you all. Have a great rest of your morning. And in fact, I see we have two more.
Yes, I see that Evie has his hand up. And just before moving on to Evie, I did want to encourage you all to take our survey. You should be getting it shortly in your email. This is going to help us for our future webinars. So please take the time it'll take you 5 minutes. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do our survey. And Evie?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, as you're using the policy platform, if you could let us know what it is that you're using, what sections, what elements of it, and how it's working for you. I think that would be great, just so that we can share those experiences with others. But thank you all very much for participating today.
Yes, and thank you, and also I was just get your question, Maria. Let's make sure to follow up with you regarding some citations for research on the taxing. So we'll be sure to follow up. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your morning, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, everybody.